Hi, this is Natalie Wernberg, and this is my creative project for our Comparative World Agriculture class. The subject that I have chosen is sustainability, sustainable agriculture in Africa. I have attached a PowerPoint that I will be using for this video. For my creative piece, I did a lesson plan. I am a Montessori teacher. I teach students between first and third grade, and so I was actually created this lesson plan and then was able to use them as my guinea pigs. And so we've been studying this for about 2 weeks now. Most Montessori classrooms, a little background information, we do geography and culture every day. And so we had done previous studies on Africa, and so they were familiar. But for my lesson plan, we did use maps, and we started drawing, introduce them to the continent of Africa, and then introduce them to the different regions and a lot of the crops. And so that was a lot of the vocabulary that we used. We discussed corn, rice, and sorghum, millet and cassava. Cereal grasses are, very one of the biggest crops that are produced in Africa. We talked about the different regions that they're in. We talked about cocoa and bananas in West Africa, and then coffee in East Africa. And we were able to kind of take a look at the different climates in these areas. We also touched on South Africa and how a lot of grapes are produced there, as well as a variety of fruits and vegetables. Africa is also known for its livestock. Pastoralism is a lifestyle where different cultures raise livestock and travel, usually long distances with them. A lot of that has changed, unfortunately, in the modernization of Africa, and that has added to a lot of the sustainability issues and food insecurities. Africa, unfortunately, has a very complex, complex food systems. In a negative way, a lot of their food systems have been broken. I personally feel that has a lot to do with colonialism. When Europeans came to Africa, it was a robust trading network. There was goods being traded all over the world, and food insecurity was nothing like it is now. Even with desert terrain and climate change, droughts and flooding, they still really had a great way of adapting with climate. Their food system, their culture was built around an adaptive food system, and so was their economics. There is 3 historic droughts recorded in history in the last 1,000 years in Africa, and during all of those droughts, it does not look like by historical and archaeological evidence that there was a lot of loss of human life, and a lot of that is contributed to specific crops and indigenous farming techniques that they had. One of them is pearl millet. That is a drought-resistant cereal grass, and that was always grown kind of as this, emergency type food. And there's many other similar crops like that. I actually have attached a great study in my PowerPoint of a lot of lost vegetables and crops of Africa. Many that indigenous grassroots projects are trying to bring back, where the people kind of planned for catastrophes and planned for bad seasons. So they had these other crops that could kind of just always, readily available. We then, after talking about the different regions, we then started talking about sustainable farming, and I didn't really go into it with my students, but again, food security is a huge issue in Africa. Many of the lowest countries with the lowest GDP in the world are located there. Many countries have the highest rates of malnutrition are in Africa. Over 30% of the population is food insecure. When we look at agriculture, there's been a lot of unsustainable practices going on for so many years that have it's kind of been this perfect storm of these different issues. Soil is a big problem. Over 65% of the soil in Africa is degraded soil, meaning that for different reasons, I would like to say that's predominantly from monoculture and lack of education and infrastructure into farming. But monoculture is one of the biggest culprits. That is where one crop has been farmed over and over and over in one space for many seasons, and it completely devoids the soil of nutrition. And soil is a living biome. This is another thing that we went into with my students, and we discussed what that looks like. What is the ecosystem of soil? Earthworms and minerals, decaying debris, decaying animals, fungus, so lots of different things that create this biome, and it ends up dying. And then these farms, which many African farms are very small, they're sustenance farmers, where they literally farm for the foods that their family eats, and many of them are on 5 hectares or smaller, so very small areas. And once the soil becomes so devoid of nutrients, it can no longer produce. So they may be getting very small yields, and it's not enough to eat. It's not enough to have, enough income for the family or for the community. So regenerative soil practices are where we take that soil and we're trying to heal it, we're trying to feed it. And kind of the opposite of monoculture is polyculture, where you're growing multiple crops. Or even take that a step further, is permaculture. And that is where you look at a piece of land with a specific design on how to use every piece of that land in the most resourceful and holistic way. And you are planting crops that complement each other, crops that are nutritious or that can bring in revenue streams, but also are bringing nutrients to the soil, bringing nutrients to the ecosystem. And so all of these things kind of work together. Agroforestry is another part of sustainable farming. A lot of grassroots projects working on that in Africa. That is where you are growing trees or shrubs along with crops. That helps fight soil erosion, helps divert wind. Again, is adding nitrogen and nutrients to the soil. We talked about a lot of this in my class, and we actually did a few experiments to kind of demonstrate some of these sustainable practices. And so one of them is where you take a white piece of paper and you place a lid with soil. I have it here. I can't really show in the video, but you then take some water and you just pour it over the soil, and a lot of the soil will splash up and splash onto the white paper. This is to demonstrate soil erosion. Then you can introduce the idea of a cover crop, You can use any object and you put that between the water and the soil. And when you pour the water, it does not splash. The splashing is significantly reduced. And so that's to give a visual of cover crop, which that is being used a lot in Africa, where you plant a different crop than your main crop once your main crop's been harvested, so that the soil is not just left dormant and vulnerable and open and exposed. The cover crop can sometimes be used as something to eat or for a source of income, but many times, no matter what, it is used to stop erosion and to bring nutrients and nitrogen back into soil. And again, the agroforestry, when you have shrubs and trees, that is another way to combat erosion. We did another experiment here on sustainable irrigation, where we used a pot with soil and we measured water, and then we would pour the water freely into the pot, and then we would see significant amount of water draining out of the pot. We would measure the water, and mostly every time we would see that most of the water poured in there was lost. We would then use a small cup of water and slowly drip water in. And this is to imitate a drip irrigation system or a more efficient irrigation system. And every time we would see that significantly less water was lost. And this is to share the idea of how soil holds water, how crops receive water, and how we can water things in a more sustainable way. I have attached again my lesson plan and a PowerPoint which goes into all of this a little bit deeper, but sustainable farming is definitely the future for Africa and for the world. Learning to be as resourceful with our land, where it is healthy for the environment and for ourselves. Strong food systems, they are the driver of strong communities, strong people, and I really appreciate this opportunity and hope you enjoyed my project. Thank you.